Well, hello there! Welcome once more to Pancho's Kitchen. And if this is your first time stopping by, I would like to say a very warm welcome to you. Join me as we prepare Ghanaian Palava sauce. This is the authentic recipe using cocoyam leaves. Can you smell the aroma? Now let's start off by prepping our ingredients. I have here some tomatoes. I'm going to cut them up and then get them ready for blending. From Cocoyam's kitchen, yeah. Delicious, yeah. Delicious. To my tomatoes, I'm going to add 1 large onion that I will cut up, 1 scotch bonnet, and some garlic. Yeah. Delicious, delicious. I'm also going to dice an onion in half. This I'm going to use in the actual stew preparation, so it's in the oil, and then the half is going to go on my meat to season it. I'm going to cook my cow skin, which we call wele in Ghana, as well as some smoked turkey wings. These are going to be part of the proteins that I'm going to add in my stew. So in the bowl they go, and then I'm going to add my half onion, which I have diced. I'm going to add some water to this now. Smoked turkey is salted. It has a lot of salt in it, so I'm not going to add any salt to my meat at this point. The skin is going to just pick up, the wele is going to pick up some of the salt that the smoked turkey is going to give off. Adding salt is going to make this too salty. I'm going to bring this to a boil. Whilst my meat cooks, I'm going to start making the actual stew. So I have some palm oil in my pot now. Let it warm up. I've added some cured fish, which we call momone in Ghana, and just when it began frying up, I also added my onions, and I'm going to let these fry together. The fish is going to disintegrate, going to bring a lot of flavor and aroma to your stew. And the onion, I'm hoping to let it get a little bit close to being caramelized, and then I'll add my blended ingredients. So I'm going to blend my tomatoes, onion, garlic, and pepper, and that is going to go in the oil. Quick check on our meat. It's doing good. I forgot to mention that the wele or the cow skin is partially cooked, and so it's not going to take any much longer. It is cooked for about 25 minutes. I'm going to give it an extra 10 minutes, and then I'll turn it off. My onions are frying beautifully. Most of my fermented fish has disintegrated. It's broken up pretty much into smaller pieces. I'm just using my spoon to just break it up some more because I actually want everything to dissolve in there. This is not for eating or anything. It's just to bring flavor and aroma. To this, I'm going to add my blended ingredients at this point. I'm also going to add my tomato paste. Mix until everything is well combined. The tomato paste is actually partially frozen still, so I'm going to try to break it up so it can just mix up perfectly. I'll then just let this cook on low heat, medium to low heat. Just let it simmer down and make sure that the tomato is not raw anymore before we add anything to it. My tomatoes has been cooking in here for about 15 minutes. I'm going to now add in some shrimp powder as well as some all-purpose seasoning, and then I'll just let it cook some more. Another 15 minutes later, and our stew is very cooked down, thickened, and ready to just receive our meat. So I'm going to pour in now my turkey wings and my cow skin, and these are also not too soft, so I'm introducing them in here a little bit early so they get a chance to cook up some more here, pick up the juices from the sauce, and then also the stock is in here as well, so that is also going to add more flavor in my stew, and everything is just going to be cooking together to make a perfect, delicious marriage. I have some agushi here. This is some melon seeds. We call it agushi in Ghana, and that is very key in making your palava sauce. I'm going to just wash them. Normally I like to use the actual seed, but you can also find it in powder form and you just have to blend it, or some people just actually mix it and then pour it in here. So I've added some salt. I always put salt in mine because that's how I learned to cook it. It helps it to form some clumps. So salt is in here. You can also add the salt after you blend, but either way it still ends up the same results. I've now blended my agushi into a thick paste, and I'm going to be just pouring them into different parts in my stew, just like I'm trying to do. And that way they just have spaces to sit. I'm just going to try to make a well in my soup and push them in there, my stew I should say, and that way they are just going to gradually cook and form some clumps, a few clumps. I've rinsed it out with just a little bit of water. You don't want to make this watery, and I'm just going to really just stack, not really stirring, because you want it to settle in there in those patches. You don't want it to be overly mixed up in your stew, otherwise you're not going to achieve some clumps. And I'm just going to cover this now and let it just cook on low heat. You want it to cook on the lowest heat possible, so it takes its sweet time to cook and form some clumps for you, otherwise it's gonna burn. I like my palava sauce exciting, so of course I've made some mackerel. This is oven smoked mackerel. I specifically cut some into smaller pieces just for this purpose, and I'm going to just pick them up. I actually just made this in the oven, and the recipe is here. I'm going to link up some recipes for you. This is very simple, and once you have it made, freeze some. You're always good to go. Good for your stews, good for your soups, or just on its own with some pepper sauce. You know, it's just so good. Now here is that ingredient that really authenticates this stew and makes it authentic palava sauce. Cocoyam leaves. These are actually taro leaves, very similar to cocoyam leaves. In my part of Ghana, we call this brobe habai, and I know some parts my husband would say cocoa. So that is what it is, very similar to cocoyam leaves. And you can easily find this in most Asian supermarkets, and that's where I got this from. And I'm just trying to trim off the stalk, and some of it have that stalk extending into the leaf. They all actually do have that, but some are thicker, so I'm also going to try to shave off some of the thick parts so I don't have that woody stalk in my leaves when I chop it up. Now I've arranged the bunch together like we normally do back home, and I'm going to try to make very nice thin slices out of that. Okay, and back home I know, you know how traditionally they just hail you by how careful, how meticulous you are about certain things. So you know, the finer your cocoyam leaves are sliced, the more it is like you had good home bringing. Okay, so me too, me trying to shrines, because you know, back in the day, like I said, me accolades. So just be careful, do it the way you want, but the thinner the nicer. But of course, once you cook this, it's going to wilt anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We were just being excessive with certain things for nothing. So I'm going to repeat this process until everything is done, slicing to make sure that I have these beautiful slices. These are long, so I'm going to end up going to cut through them just so that my leaves are not too long. I don't have long spirals of leaf in my stew. And that is pretty much all that there is to this. I'm going to finish it and then we'll continue. Delicious, yeah, delicious, da da da, delicious, delicious, da da. Delicious, yeah, delicious. Can you smell the aroma? Yeah, from Kwachiwa's kitchen. Yeah, delicious. My agushi has cooked for about 10 minutes now. Beautifully cooked. It has formed some clumps, just like I wanted it to. I'm just stirring through to make sure that I don't burn the bottom of my pot. And at this point, it is pretty cooked enough that I can add the rest of my ingredients. So I'm going to add in here my smoked mackerel or my grilled mackerel, whatever way you want to call it, in here. And I also have some mushroom that I'm going to add to it. Delicious, yeah, delicious. So I have 3 kinds of mushroom here. The big one is trumpet mushroom, and the pieces next to it is the same thing that I have cut up. So right here now is my shiitake mushroom, and right now in my hand is oyster. So I'm going to add all of it in here. The oyster and the trumpet really feel like the kind of mushroom we have in Ghana that grows in the soil. And the shiitake to me is a little bit like the ones that come from palm trees. So together it's just a perfect combination. So if you are looking for what we call dunkwamre in my part of Ghana, then your oyster and trumpet mushroom is going to serve that purpose. In order for the mushroom to thoroughly cook through, I've covered my pot, let it cook for about 5 minutes, and 5 minutes later I'm just going to stir everything. You can see that it is not that raw anymore. It is beginning to get very well cooked up, but I'm going to give it an additional 3 minutes. Those trumpet mushrooms are a little bit thicker, so it takes a little longer to cook. I want it to be all the way cooked before I add anything else to it. My mushroom is good to go now. It's perfectly cooked at this point. And now I can confidently add in my very last ingredient, which is my cocoyam leaves. And our stew at this point is pretty much done. At this point, you can start boiling your rice or your yam or your plantain or making your eba, whatever you're going to have this with. Just get it ready because stew is almost done. So yes, I have a big pile of cut up cocoyam leaves here. And at this point, it looks like there's no more room for anything else, but you know, this just like spinach leaves will wilt in a heartbeat. So I'm just trying to nudge them in here and then gradually turn it so the top part gets to the bottom so it gets a chance to cook. And that way I'm going to be able to make room for the rest of my leaves because I still have quite a bit that I want to add in here as well. So you see that once it gets into the stew, mix up with the oil and a little bit of heat that is coming from the bottom, this is beginning to go down. It is just going to start wilting, and then I can add the rest of my cut up cocoyam leaves. Delicious, yeah, delicious, 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 yeah, delicious. Can you smell the aroma? Once I get all my leaves in my pot, I'm just going to not even stress myself stirring it. I'm going to cover it, and the heat that is going to be trapped in my pot is going to help wilt everything down so that when you stir it, it is a whole lot easier, very less stressful. You're not going to have spills all over on your stove top and on your kitchen floor. Just like this, so simple. And at this point, you can see that our stew is pretty much done. Cocoyam leaf, just like spinach leaf, is just a vegetable. It's green leafies. You don't want to overcook it. So you just want it to just get to the point where it is getting soft. I know that back home we say if you don't cook it well enough, of course, it's going to make your throat itch. So you want it to be well cooked, but you don't want to overcook it. So I'm stirring this around. I'm going to let it go for about 5 more minutes. And our stew is pretty much done at this point, ready to go on the table. Simple. Absolutely delicious. It smells so good, and this is what you can really call a real taste of home because it's Palava sauce with the very right ingredients. But then of course we all know spinach is what is easier to find, so you can make this with spinach just like I have done in other videos in almost all my life in this country. But if you can find cocoyam leaves every now and then, you can give yourself that real taste of home. Stew is done now. Everything perfectly cooked. Flavors very well set with all these ingredients in here. Such a beautiful marriage. And yes, this is about to go down. Can you see how gorgeous this looks? Well, I hope you try this, especially for this holiday. Make it special. Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video, and until I come your way next time with something delicious, be loving, be kind, be happy.